When I'm flooding a lot of cookies with the same color, in this case when I want to do a painted set, I hate to mess with pulling out bags and flooding them each individually, especially when I just need that white base coat like this. So today I'm going to show you how I get that white royal icing base coat so that I can paint over top simply by dipping those cookies and saving myself a little bit of time, which is what we all need, right? Heads up, this video is from a while back, so I look a little different. Hey y'all, I'm Sarah Grace. I'm a small town mama who started a cookie decorating business that allowed me the flexibility to work from home and spend more time with my kids. I created this YouTube channel as well as the SG Cookie Academy to teach you the cookie decorating you need in order to do the same. You can find info in the description on how to start decorating cookies like a pro as soon as this weekend. Thanks so much for watching. Okay, so I'm starting by making a batch of royal icing in the mixer. This is just a large batch, and you can watch my Royal Icing 101 video. I'll link it in the cards up here. That way you can see how I make my royal icing and all that information. After scraping down the bowl, I'm just adding a bit more water. I typically add about a half a cup to a full batch of royal icing to get it to flood consistency when I'm making a huge batch of flood. For instance, when I'm dipping cookies or when I'm making it ahead for an in-person cookie class. I go just a little bit thinner than flood. You'll be able to see here in just a second what that looks like. But for dipping, it seems like just a little bit thinner than that 20 seconds, maybe around a 10 to 15 second icing is perfect for dipping. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to 10, 15, 20 second icing, I totally understand. That was where I was when I started too. I have a video about that as well. You can click the card up above here and it will take you to my how to know your icing is the right consistency video.
Hey y'all. Today I'm going to be showing you how I dip my cookies instead of flooding them. On some cookies I still flood because I want to get certain details and make them look a certain way, but on a lot of cookies that I'm just going to be hand painting, instead of taking the time to dam and flood them, I just dip them. That way it's done and it doesn't take nearly as much time. I've got a flood consistency royal icing here. It's just a little bit thin because I find that makes the dip go a little smoother. As you can see, there are just a few air bubbles in here, so I like to tap it out a couple times to make all the air bubbles rise to the top, and then kind of try and swish a flat spatula around in there, and that gets rid of a few of our air bubbles. Now, as you get closer to the bottom of the pot of your icing, I say a pot because I use this giant mixer bowl for mine when I'm doing a lot of cookies at one time. As you get closer to the bottom, you're going to find that there aren't as many air bubbles to worry about. So that's not a huge deal, and you can always take those out with your scribe tool when you get to that part. So what I'm doing is just getting set up here. I've got all my cookies. I've got my icing, and I have a baking tray that stacks. That way I can set the cookies up on here, and if there's any royal icing that is gonna run off the edge, I try to avoid having that happen, but if I do, I put a piece of parchment paper under my cookie back and just add that under there so that it can flow off if it's kind of keep from getting a mess under there. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so these cookies are for a wedding set that I'm doing. If you watched my The Kids Are at Grandma's All Day Bake With Me video, I just posted that one, then you have seen me baking these cookies. I had some heart-shaped ones and a few of these little plaque type cookies. Those are going to be painted with a really pretty sunflower theme for a wedding coming up. And I'm going to be doing hand painting on both of these types of cookies. So they really don't need to be popped and flooded. I can get the same effect with dipping. So I'm just gonna take it face down into the icing, and I'm holding kind of at the back edge of the cookie, trying to keep my fingers out of the icing if at all possible. I've got fat fingers, so they kind of slip down in there anyway. But just as straight as you can, kind of wiggle it around in there, and then pull it up at an angle so that your icing is flowing off of the end of the cookie. I like to tip it the other direction as well. I have done my icing thicker than this before and just wasn't happy with the result. It didn't smooth out the way I wanted it to. So I've started using just a little bit thinner, and you do use quite a bit of icing. If you need to scrape it off on the side of the bowl, that's no problem. It'll just kind of, and I just like to shake it a little bit to get it evened out. And you can see here, there are quite a few air bubbles at this point, but I'm just gonna let it sit for 4 or 5 seconds while I dip the next cookie so that those air bubbles have time to develop any more air that they're going to. And then with my scribe tool, I'll go back and pop those air bubbles. I'm just going straight into the icing again and coming up. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of air between the cookie and the icing. Here's what that looks like when you get that. I just take it right back in the bowl. Don't stress about it. Repeat the same process, turning, twisting. And if you want to make it a little quicker, you can just kind of graze the edge. Don't scrape, just graze the top of that icing with the edge of the bowl. And wiggle it out again. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. This is still way, way easier than popping and flooding to me, even with all the wiggling you have to do. So I'm gonna bring my cookies over here that I've already done so that you can see those. And if you can see, I'm just gonna take my scribe tool and go through and pop those bubbles like this. I just swish it kind of across the cookie. And it hasn't been sitting long enough that it has any crust of any kind. It still flows back together really well. It looks really pretty. It has enough icing to give it that really pretty porcelain enamel look. And then I go back and do this one. It's had enough time that any air bubbles we're gonna have popped up.
Ready to take your baking to the next level? Check out the SG Cookie Academy. Members get access to over 10 online cookie decorating classes with new classes added every month, as well as monthly live coaching in our member-only Facebook group. There's info in the first link in the description.